Good evening. The Finance Committee meeting for September 12th, 2023. Tonight we're going to review and vote on some items if we have enough information for the special town meeting warrant. We'll have member input, public input, minutes, and then we'll adjourn the meeting and talk about our next meeting. So with that, we have our interim town administrator here to talk over the warrant. Brian, if you want to...
Okay, all right. Wouldn't mind passing that down. Over this on this side. So we're going to do handouts. We're going to go a little old school today. So, all right. So I talked with Steve about this, and would it be okay if I move up? Is Tyler coming? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
He might be late, but...
He might be late. The last meeting he came late, and then we get to find a seat for him, I think. So hopefully he won't find us to be rude, but be that as it may. So as you all know, we are in the process of finalizing our, in the process for moving forward with our special town meeting, which is scheduled for Wednesday, November 1st. Just a reminder of where we're at in the schedule. The warrant closes to the public, and that's for any warrant articles coming in from the public via citizen petition on Friday, September 15th. We will be, Select Board will be meeting again on Monday, September 18th. And then we are going to be completing or determining any final order for that. I think it would be on Tuesday, September 26th. So town meeting report then goes to the printer on Thursday, September 28th. Should be receiving that. Then we post the warrant because we have the report, and then we actually have the part we have to actually post formally in all of our locations and various churches and what have you per our town code. And we hope to have the actual report delivered to the post office on October 13th. Town will be receiving it over that weekend, and then it'll be a few weeks before our, of course, November 1st special town meeting.
So the warrant actually closes on the 26th? That's the drop dead date?
Well, the board is going to vote to close the warrant on, they're going to vote to close the warrant on the 25th. So if there's anything else that we need to do sort of in the interim that we need to put in, the board would have that option. But right now it looks as if we've got 24 articles, I should say, that we would be proposing that would be going before Fincom and the Select Board for their consideration. So, the hope is to vote everything on Monday, September 18th.
Okay.
So,
Which is
And this is a joint meeting?
I think it's, yeah.
That's, we're planning, I talked with Ryan, so we'll meet on Monday with the Select Board. On the 18th is a joint meeting.
Monday, the 18th?
And so,
Time to be determined.
Right. So it doesn't look like a particularly busy agenda at this point. This is obviously going to take up the majority. This is going to be the main item, is to go through the warrant articles. Where we are in terms of a process is we've started to. We're kind of showing you the high level here on the spreadsheet about what those items are, and then we're working on the back end about putting together working with town council, getting the language correct in terms of what account is this going to from that account, and all the specifics that go into it. It's just at this point it isn't mature enough to be able to then present this to you so that you're actually looking at it. We hope to have something like a first draft of that we would then include in the select board packet, and we of course share with you guys as well to kind of see where that's at, and of course talk about then from that what order the article should be and things of that nature. So
As we go through the things tonight, if we feel like we have enough information, we're comfortable voting, we can vote them. If not, we have the 18th with the Select Board to do it, and if there's still more discussion, we still have the 25th.
yeah, I mean, I think that Yeah, I think we may throw in another meeting in there if necessary. So we have the option of having the meeting on the 25th and having a meeting basically 1 week after, if necessary. So, so that it's there, and it's there as again, if necessary.
If necessary.
Yeah, So, any questions so far in terms of the process? So what Steve and I talked about was we came up with a table to kind of go through the articles, and I'll go through all of the articles with you, but of course some of them don't have financial implications to them. But if it's okay with you, I will just go through everything so you're aware of what the breadth of what we're looking at is. So first piece is, if you remember, if you look at your annual town meeting warrant, typically we take time in the beginning. I think you may have made a comment about it, Brian, about saying, the appointment of a field driver, an offense viewer, and measures of, it's one of these things that takes time in the beginning of the meeting. And frankly, this is just one of these outdated components. We basically have staff that do a lot of these things, although field driver, I'm not quite sure. If we had livestock who are getting use in town, my guess is the fire department probably would be doing that in partnership with the police on that front. So it's just really, it's just something that has been in the warrant year after year, and we're just trying to clean some of these things up so we can have a more efficient town meeting. So basically the idea would be to eliminate these roles so that we can just get right into the business of town meeting at the annual town meeting. Next piece, along that same theme, town clerk had approached me and asked about eliminating some boards that are either outdated or committees or funds. We're working with town council on that. Most of it should be low-hanging fruit, because I think for last count, and I think this is an undercount, but if I look at the town website, I think we have 48 boards and committees as a community, which it's a high number. It's hard to manage that, and some of those boards, we're set up for a specific purpose, and that purpose has expired in some cases. So it really, I think if anything, we're trying to get more of the low-hanging fruit. If there's any group or board that we think that still has utility and could still be meeting, we wouldn't touch that in this case. This is really just kind of getting more of the obvious pieces in there and more of a housekeeping article on that front. Item 3 I kept in there. This was a proposal that was put forward by our police chief to add a new position as school resource officer. As I understand, I think the school committee was maybe voting on whether or not to support this or not, but in the interim, the police chief has withdrawn that request. So I don't think we're going to be seeing that at this time. And I did have a conversation with Kelly, and I think he understands that any conversation about this would probably be pushed to the annual and be part of our overall budget process. So I think it's an interesting question. It's just in that I'm relatively new to the process here. And I think there's a question about how people, when they think of the special town meeting, is this, do we or do we not want it to be budget 2.0, right? And I think that there's been, at least as I've heard, there's some concerns about people saying, well, if you wanted this, it should have been vetted as part of the annual town meeting process. And so I can understand that argument. I also know that there are times that, and we meet twice a year, there are times when exceptions need to be made, but in this case, I think it's just part of that conversation and, for that, so.
Right. I actually had a conversation with the chief as well, and my understanding, his understanding was that he had wanted to bring this last year and was asked to defer essentially till now, and now we're saying, oh, it's a special defer to next year. And I suggested to him, keep it in there, man. You did what we told you to do. But he said, no, I'm going to be a team player, and I'm going to, defer. And I said to him, and I'll say now, being a team player, I think ought to get rewarded. So come, we'll do the right financial thing, but it should be acknowledged that he's being a good
So I also had a conversation with the chief. Chief called me, and I had watched the select board meeting last week when this was discussed, and Chuck was talking about how the select board promised the chief that he would get this person, and they took it off the table to fund now. And that is not the way it really happened. If
To
you
fund what?
remember,
What did you say, to fund what?
to fund this officer now.
Now,
Take it off the
now,
table
got
and
it.
fund it now.
Understand.
What, if you remember, we were presented a balanced budget last
Right.
year.
Mhm.
And that police officer was not part of that budget.
Mhm.
So there was no promises by the select board made or the finance committee made, because for all intents and purposes, we didn't know about those things. Okay? So the chief, as when I talked to him, said, that's absolutely correct. In his meeting with Anthony and Alicia, they took it out of the budget. So it never made it to these boards to discuss. Anthony took it out, and that was it. I just looked at the budget change report that we got with our packet, which balanced the original budget we got to the balanced budget. There's no officer on here.
It's not even in,
It's not there.
Yeah, I think, and if I could, I think maybe that different things are cut out at different times, so maybe this might have been even from the
Even
from
pre-
before that, I think. So I think what the chief had depicted was accurate, and I think that, so I think, and then the question becomes when it comes back at that point, and I think the select board was struggling with that concept as well as to when that timing should be.
That's the same process, though, that we're going to do this year, where you're going to come bring us a balanced budget. We've already made cuts, so maybe it's just important to let the department managers know that when they do meet with us, that they should spell out anything that's been removed to that point, just so
Or the-
it's on our radar.
And Jerry,
we'll
that
know about
the
it.
select board was asking for that very thing. We try,
Okay.
yeah, no, I agree with you, because I think they need to know what was part of that mix. I think that at this particular one, and Steve's probably, I think that Steve's right, the chief's right, it's just, there are so many components that make up a $63 million budget.
Right, right.
you
And we
know.
certainly did get some of that, but,
Yeah.
yeah, it may have been cut at various times that we didn't get it all, so.
Right. Well, I mean, it'll be an interesting conversation this round,
Well, I would
just
just
from
put it on
seeing.
the department managers. It's their responsibility to make sure that we're aware of it if something was cut.
Right.
Well,
So that we
like Anthony
know.
said, he
Yeah.
was being a team player. He
Yeah,
didn't bring
yeah.
it up in his discussion in front of us on
Yeah.
that Super Saturday, because it's been cut and,
Right, but at least just that way so that they make sure that we at least know that that's.
right.
Yeah,
But that would be
on
something
their
that
radar.
Brian
Yeah.
and Al would
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
get from talking with the police
True,
department
true.
and bring back to us and say,
but it's,
this doesn't look like it's going to make it,
Yeah.
that type of thing.
regardless of where it was in the process where this head count was pulled out, if the chief believes that he had a deal, then it should be documented that there's a deal. And if this is, the place where it should be documented, so that we don't have this discussion next year, that, you chopped ahead and nobody knew about it, and, that kind of thing. So at least we say, okay, well, we know we're pushing this out, if we can afford it, or if we can fund it. But it really should be documented that,
Now, I'm sure this year will be, because the chief has already told me that he will be asking for additional officers coming.
But just in
No.
general.
No, absolutely. Not, we're just picking on this one position. I'm sure there are other positions that were cut and maybe,
But as far as we know, the cuts were all here.
right, no,
And there
that's,
are personnel that was asked for that were cut
Right.
that are here.
But it also points to every time we cut and say next year, well, we've just incurred, possibly an unfunded liability for next year. So I'm making this up, but if he was asking for one person, one officer this year, in the spring, he might say, I need two, because I need that guy or that person. So it's just, it's awesome that we save and go balance, but kicking the can down the road, the can gets bigger.
Oh, well,
As well.
Fire chief at the select board meeting asked for 3 people.
Right, yeah.
Well, there you go, yeah.
It's, that's the very nature of budgeting, Brian,
Oh.
and then we have to sort of stop at whatever point in time that we have and balance things out, because that's the
Absolutely.
expectation, so.
Oh, yeah.
But I think, again, to Jerry's point, I think that it's exactly what the board wants to see, it's what you want to see, and I think, and I think it's too, it gives the boards the opportunity to see, if we go through this, there are a lot of ask, and there's a lot of needs that we see regularly I think it's a healthy thing to have part of that conversation. But part of my job is in the PA's office is to kind of just temper some of those expectations just based upon the reality of what we have. And we started last year with a $1.7 million deficit. That was an unpleasant place to be, but it's part of that responsibility of explaining it to our staff and trying to get them to understand and get on board so that we can all, that we can't necessarily give everybody what they want. It's also important to point out too in the budget process, people get a lot of things that they do want.
Right.
Most importantly, they get the people funded for the most part who they already have in place. And if we're not cutting back on that, in 1.7 million, we could have been looking at cuts at that point.
And we started worse than that at some years.
I believe you, Brian. I believe you. So it really is a collaborative effort. But I think I do definitely hear the point about making. I think there's value that not only do I hear that loud and clear from the finance committee and the select board, I do think there's also value for you to hear that because of what some of these other things are, because sometimes it's just trying to match that scope with what we have for resources. It's endemically challenging and one of the hardest tasks that any town administrator has to go through.
Ambiguity,
Yes.
And that's really, I think, that's what we sort of expected this to do. And if, in fact, that can be maybe more inclusive, then I think that would help everybody.
One of the things that we can possibly do is go to those major departments, especially the people who are responsible for them as liaisons, and start talking to them about developing a personnel plan for the next 3 to 5 years. What do you want to see? So we can start to do some planning and be prepared and not just, this year I want 2 and this year well, let's have a plan so we can start funding those things.
Well, it's funny, last year when Alan and I talked to police, and, they gave us the tour, and the station is pretty cramped, they're making pretty efficient use of the space. But, I said, how many more, because the town's just growing, you're gonna need more officers, by and by. At what point does the building need a second floor or something? And he's like, so that's, there's gonna come a time when we have that discussion. It's not as far off as we think.
The original plan had a second floor in that building,
Yeah?
and it had to be cut for,
So, anyway,
If you can't stop by, wave. So,
yeah, anyway.
So,
Carry on,
be that as it may, Okay. Item 4 is electronic voting for a town meeting. So this is based on a quote from a vendor who is on the state bid list, which is helpful for us. So I have tasked the town moderator and the town clerk with coming back with a proposal, and this is what they've come back with. Initially, we were looking at potentially looking at 500 clickers, I guess, or whatever voting machines you'd use, the handhelds. And I think there was the perspective of the town clerk and the town moderator based on looking at actual attendance at prior town meetings that they thought the 700 number would be robust enough to be able to handle most of our meetings. We also have the alternative or option here, because the system is used by other municipalities, that we have the option of saying, okay, well, we know there's going to be a big subject coming up, and we can borrow some amount of those same remotes from other communities as well. So presuming we are the same.
Reciprocal agreement where
Something, yeah.
they can borrow ours, we can
Probably
borrow
be
theirs.
even, yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I'd give it that title. It'd be just somebody picking up the phone like, hey, our town meeting's happening. Do you have any extras? And
Is it possible we can just do that? Just call around and
Yeah, I think
get it and not buy it for ourselves, just borrow.
the recommendation before you was a recommendation of the town clerk and the moderator. I think the number I had in here was 500, I think, but I think this is what they wanted to do, is a little bit more conservative. So the hope would be that we would then have the funding, that the town meeting approves the funding here in the fall, and then we come back to you, come back and actually have the electronic voting at the annual town meeting, would be the hope. We also, with the vendor, I think, hope to do a demonstration at between one of our select board meetings between now, when we vote, we meet next week, and when the town meeting takes place, to kind of show them how that works. So giving a little demonstration, we thought would be useful. So,
Steve, if it's okay with you, I'd say, can we just vote on this one?
Absolutely.
I move that we accept, I move that FinCom approves, is that
Recommends.
Article 4?
Recommends.
Recommends Article 4.
Have a motion and a second?
A second.
Jerry seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
As an old member of the study committee that may still exist and need to be phased out from 10 years ago, I'm so happy to see this.
You're happy to be phased out.
1 o'clock counting ballots again.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's really something. like
Yes,
that.
that's yes. We all were actually. It was a collaborative effort.
It was.
You were there too.
Yeah, I was there.
That's
Till 1
it.
o'clock in the morning.
That's it. That's it.
No, this is awesome.
And
Totally
so,
awesome.
thank you for that. Moving along, item 5 is a request from the Parks and Recreation Community Education Commission to increase the revolving fund expenditure limit from 1.1 million to 1.3 million. So just as a reminder, for the annual town meeting, we have the limits in our revolving funds in terms of spending limits. So I think, talking with Steve about this, trying to remember why was this being asked for, and I think that even for the annual, there was some question about, as we transitioned from this fund, which was an enterprise fund, into a revolving fund, I think there was some discussion about this increasing to 1.3, but for whatever reason, that never got in, and this just amends basically the vote that was taken back in May for that. So,
And if I remember correctly, Alicia was recommending this, basically.
Alicia.
It never,
Sorry. Was it Alicia?
Alicia.
Sorry, it's confusing. I don't know why I got too
always get
many.
those two.
Alicia, I know.
Alicia, our former finance director, was recommending
Fair.
that this be increased.
But we just didn't, yeah.
But it never made it to the warrant.
Never made it to the warrant, so.
Do we know what their run rate is? I mean, is this, we going to vote it and they're never even going to get close, or is this?
Yeah, I think this is their.
Really makes sense.
So Fred, this is their first year as a revolving fund. So we can look to see if we can get maybe some more information on that. But it's but we can get you a run rate on that. See where we're at.
I'll make a motion that we support the increase. If there are more programs, it's more income. There's no reason to have them bump up against the ceiling, but I would just be curious what the actually run rate is. But I don't think there's any negative impact of us raising
I'll
it.
second.
The good
Just
news,
raises
the good
the
news,
ceiling, that's all.
motion in a second, but the good news is if they're able to spend 1.3, it means they're taking in revenues of at least that, because they can't
Yeah,
spend.
no,
it.
that's why I say it's
So the
funded.
programs must be good, and people are
Yep.
using them, so that's good to see. We have a motion and a second to recommend Article 5. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you.
Who seconded it?
I did.
Oh, Brian, okay.
Okay. Article 6 is a request to raise and appropriate the funding for the town's sewer betterment assessment. So, as you can probably see from the amount of backhoes here in the town hall, the sewer project is moving along. As I understand, I think from my last update from Nick, the collection system is moving a little bit ahead of schedule, a little bit behind on the treatment plant, which is right down the street, adjacent to 495. So progress is being made on that through the hard work of the Treasurer Collector's Office, and Steve is taking the lead on that. We provided our estimates out for our, 80 some odd betterment accounts. So did that all through registered mail. So what that does is it means that there is a lien against each one of those properties that basically say that you owe us a certain amount of money in this betterment. What's there right now is based the current costs that are being charged that will be, I think they'll be put out on our third quarter bill. Steve, is that right? Yeah. So
Yes.
Third quarter
it'll be
bill.
Appearing on the February bill.
and it's based upon what our current cost estimate is for the project, and at that 10% of that estimate at this time. So come 2 years from now, roughly speaking, when the project's complete and we true up what the costs are going to be, we would then be sending the actual betterments out to those 80 accounts and say that, that they would be paying an annual amount based upon roughly, I think, a 30-year payback period on it. Now, some entities have the right to be able to pay that early. If they're so inclined, they can pay the whole amount. We give them some options with that. So, but really, what this is because right now, as of today, the only sewer customer is the town of Littleton, that we are requesting the $82,000 to be raised and appropriate to pay said betterment.
And the betterment is based off the net?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And is there any other expected aid coming in?
I think we've applied for a MassWorks grant for this year. We haven't
I haven't
heard
seen it
anything.
yet. Okay, so that would be trued up after.
Right.
That'll be
Yeah,
trued up
that-
when the source
When
system's
that-
done and we do the final.
Same goes to Fred, for for potential loan forgiveness that may be available to us. So we're continuing to have active dialogue with our legislative delegation, and we've got some good connections on the governor's office now. So there may be some other possibilities there as well, but nothing's promised at this point.
Now, the Greskowski property, homestead, whatever it's called there, that is actually hooking into the municipal system.
The Hager system, Hager Homestead.
So are they receiving a bill? the way we
Received,
are?
They
yes. Mhm.
have received and paid a bill so far. Well, they paid before they even received. So they've done I think it was a $46,000 payment
Mhm.
when they were going to hook into the existing system. But now that's being applied to their betterment. I don't know the time frame that
Yeah, no, I don't know
It's
when this is
gonna hook
going to
up,
start
yeah.
flushing toilets over there either, but I was just wondering.
But
because I
physically,
know
they're
they were-
already connected. It was,
Because they've-
they did that in the spring, Fred.
Okay, yeah,
The line's been put in.
when they
because
when
they'll be actually hooked up before the plant is finished down there. So it'll be going into the system down at the school, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah, so-
temporarily.
Yeah.
Right. That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I think it was like a 46,000 is sticking in my
Okay.
head.
Mhm.
That's being
All right.
applied to their betterment. So, and we've received maybe 8 payments in full so far on this 10% that's gone out from the 80 or so parcels. And then we've attached to that an election form where they could say they want it spread over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years. And we've gotten some of those back. They have until September 28th, I believe, to get those back to us, or else we choose 30 years for those customers that don't respond to us.
Any reason
Yeah, why would we choose 30 years? Why wouldn't we choose something less?
Because the debt is
If
30 years.
they aren't good enough to fill it out? I mean, why wouldn't we say, okay, you didn't choose, so we're choosing 10 years for you?
Tomorrow.
I think, Fred, it's part of Mass General Law, whereas I think the intention there would be to say that if someone doesn't give an intent, that you give them the most conservative
Yeah.
perspective on that, would be my guess.
And we're spreading this over 30 years because the debt is over 30 years, and the special legislation allowed us to do that. Or else it would have been 20 years for everything.
Okay, all right.
Trying to make it as
Palatable.
palatable as possible for
Okay.
the residents.
That's right.
Unless there's anything we're waiting on, I'd say I move that we approve, recommend? Which one?
Recommend.
Recommend. I'll get it at some point. We recommend Article 6.
Have a motion, a second?
Jerry, this is yours, you want to
I'll
second it?
second it, yeah.
Okay, there you go. Now you won't get in trouble with your
There you
commissioners.
go.
You're supporting them.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
One thing I would note in terms of the votes, but, and I think this is fine, but that, we may change the order of this at the end, so, it's just, it may be, I think the spirit of it is there, so just, that's fine.
Right. If
No
you
big
change,
deal.
if you change
Right.
6 to 7,
As long as,
we're-
it's right, there you go,
it's
okay, as long as we
Yeah.
understand
Yeah,
that.
we get it.
Okay, got it, right. Okay.
Well, some
I guess
some of
one
us are
thing-
anyway, right?
Yeah.
One thing I guess we should talk about, because we see that's in the raise and appropriate column, we should talk about the funding sources here. So we had a balanced budget at the, May town meeting. We came in with a balanced budget. After that point, the state finalized their budget, and the cherry sheet was more than what Alicia had projected in the numbers that we used to balance the budget.
Cherry sheet, by the way, state funding, so state aid based.
It's very good news, and it was $500,000
Oh, wow.
more. The schools are well aware that the money came in, and we'll see how it's being spent, but you can see the raise and appropriate column. We'll make
basically
use of
coming
that
out of that.
$500,000.
Right. But in this one, this is money that the town is essentially paying it to itself, right?
We're paying it to the sewer department, yes. Yes, which is a town enterprise fund.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Our total betterment right now, based on the estimates that we have for the total project, is around just shy of $900,000.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
However, we have been responsible for the debt service
Right.
up until, I guess, even into the project. So all the debt service that we've done for the land, and there was a couple of the pieces that we've been borrowing for
Right.
up to this point, we've been paying, and we will be getting reimbursed for those dollars over time. And we will make sure that we get reimbursed for those dollars over time.
Darn right.
Steve, did you want to go through the other categories? You started on raise and appropriate.
Yeah. So like I said, the capital stabilization, and Ryan will get into this next one. We sat down with the chief assessor, went through the overlay account. So everybody know tax overlay account? Overlay. So it's a reserve account for the assessors that if somebody applies for an abatement and they're granted the abatement, or they go to the appellate tax board and win, they get basically a reimbursement on their taxes that they paid, and that's the account it comes out of. So every year in our budget, we put money into the overlay. And it's not something that is appropriated, it's just a deposit that's made into the overlay account, doesn't need town meeting appropriation. So each year, we put money in there, and with the changes in finance directors over the years, that account has grown. We also, Select Board voted to take a TIF away from
Potpourri.
Potpourri in town, and what they were being given a tax break on was never taxed by the town because of the TIF, and once we took the TIF away, all that was being able to be taxed, which is new growth to the town. So that came in last year.
There's a bluebird. Right.
We put it aside into the overlay just in case potpourri were to go to the appellate tax board and make their case that we were taxing them too much. They didn't. They didn't have really a case to stand on anyways. So that extra money, I think it was about $1 million or so, that went in, is now part of this
And they only had so
$4.4
much time
million.
to do that?
Yes. $4.4 million that is extra in the overlay account based on what the assessors want. The Board of Assessors have voted to release the $4.4 million, and now we're coming up to articles where we will spend that $4.4 million. But it's not really spending, as you'll see.
Right,
from
right.
so.
And so with that, and it's a great introduction, Steve. So what we would be proposing to do under that, we have $4.4 million available. And what Steve and I talked about in terms of where the use would be and what we thought would be most appropriate, the first piece would be setting aside about $4 million to the Capital Stabilization Fund. Back of our mind, while we can't state it explicitly, would be that this would be a funding source potentially in May for renovation of 36 King Street, also known as Indian Hill. So this provides for it doesn't mean that this is what we're going to spend, but it does give you a sense about what we could be setting aside, and we'll have an actual, the hope is with 36 King Street is that we will have an actual bid in hand at the annual town meeting. Still kind of working out the mechanics of how that can happen, but that would be the goal at this time. So $4 million would go into the Capital Stabilization Fund, and we also talked about what we're proposing is $400,000 going into the Community Preservation Act Fund, so that it would be as goes into the fund and provides a bit of relief for funding specifically for the tennis courts, which is also related to kind of tied in a little bit with 36 King Street because it is adjacent, and we would hope that with Parks and Rec being based at 36 King Street, there'd be a logical tie with the tennis courts right there as well. So the importance of putting the $400,000 into the Community Preservation Act Fund is that we will then, basically, that's the equivalent of our 1% of how we would, we talked a lot about that at Carolyn at our last meeting, how we might be able to do that. And we think that by channeling it through the CPC in this manner would provide us with an advantage where we can get the match from the state and provide a benefit in that way. So
And that's consistent with our
Smile.
financial policy. It was worth coming out tonight, Carol. But just so everybody knows, I mean, it is consistent with our financial policy.
So that's the request, is to, the split of the 4.4 million is that the 4 million be deposited to the Capital Stabilization Fund and the other $400,000 be transferred to the Community Preservation Fund.
So this may wind up being like two separate articles, because one would be the deposit into stabilization, the other would be a deposit into CPC. But the gist of it is we're going to take 4.4 million from overlay and divide it into those two buckets.
Yep.
Thank goodness for those couch seat cushions.
So no matter where these articles wind up, do I have a motion to recommend?
Motion to recommend.
Well, we didn't vote number 5. I don't think, did we?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, that's right, Jerry. We got Jerry out of trouble with our commissioners, so that's good. Okay, so that was good. All right.
So
Well, I'll
Brian
vote.
made the motion. We have a second?
Yeah, I'll either move or second, whichever.
Second, yeah.
And
All in favor?
number 7.
Aye.
Right?
And people thought I was kidding when I mentioned this last time, but is there any possibility that we would sell naming rights for that?
You mean you're not still kidding?
I'm not kidding. Somebody might say, I've got 100,000 burning a hole in my pocket,
All right.
and I want a name. And I'd say if somebody does, let's take their money and put their name on the building.
It's an interesting question, Brian. I believe that the select board, and I don't mean this facetiously, has a 280-page policy and procedures book. I believe there's something in there about naming, I would guess, so that sometimes is it can be a somewhat sensitive matter in terms of how they approach it, and then and certainly if someone's paying for it, that's a possibility. But
I mean, over at the library, people bought, or people sponsored, is the right word?
Right,
You know,
right.
various conference rooms. Like, and they raised a
Yeah, yeah.
some fair bucks.
And that's.
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
just saying.
Point taken, no, that's true, yeah, that is true, yes, you're right, so, okay. All right, moving along, Article 8 is a transfer of $6,000 from the Board of Trustees to the Elder and Human Services Sampson Fund. Steve, you might want to speak to this one. This has to be a warrant article for what, I know there was a specific reason why this has to be a warrant article.
I was never clear why these things needed to be warrant articles, but two finance directors in a row said that any non-scholarship dollars come out of the trust funds have to be voted at town meeting.
Okay.
So this is, in Fred and, full disclosure, Fred and I are commissioners of trust funds. Tyler was a former commissioner. This is from one of the funds that we do, the Sampson Fund, which is for
For the animals.
the animal benefit in town. So anybody who has something, anything to do with animals can ask for some funds, and if, as long as there's a program to do it. And what we've been doing with EHS is funding, if somebody has veterinary services that they can't afford, they go to EHS, and EHS, out of this bucket of dollars, will pay that veterinary bill. We've been doing this for probably about 4 or 5 years now, maybe even longer. And there was a time where we were funding it at a bigger rate than what they could spend it. So there was one year that it wasn't done. This year, they came back to us and said, yes, we've exhausted all the funds you've given us. We could use some more. So we're doing $6,000 to the Elder and Human Services Department. So that will be a warrant article. Fred and I have already approved this as commissioners, but we should do it as as finance committee members also.
Well, I move that we do so for Article 8, since you two probably can't be the ones who say that.
I'll second.
Moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And next item is Article 9. It's a request for a stabilization fund transfer at the Shattuck Street project. So basically what this is that the senior center building fund, stabilization fund, if you will, is we're getting closer to breaking ground on the new senior center project, looking like probably a spring groundbreaking at this point, based upon what our current schedule assumptions would be. And we have right now, and Steve, please correct me, I believe it's $5 million set aside in that fund. $5 million instead of having been set there, also has been able to garner some interest income generated from that. Right now, we estimate that amount to be around $210,000, $211,000. So the hope would be that we could get the approval to make the transfer of the interest and close out the account for the special town meeting, because we know we're going to have needs in that side of things. And by transferring over that, we then, again, close out the stabilization, or the senior center building stabilization fund, and put the interest over to it. I believe Steve was saying that our meeting is going to be, the next time we're going to get an update on interest income will be on October 31st, which would be just before town meeting. So I think what we'll be proposing would be to put the actual figure on the floor of town meeting, but which should be roughly to this tune.
That way we can totally close out the account. get it all up to date.
this
Closing
is-
out the stabilization account?
No, this
Looking at
is the
senior
senior
center
center stabilization. So this is a distinct, separate account.
Transferring all
Putting it
those
away.
dollars to the project
Oh,
itself.
okay.
So currently, Jerry's 5 million,
So
and
you
we've
can't
got.
spend out of that, you have to move it to the project?
You'd have to
spend
move it to the, right, so that it's to be able to move what, and I think the 5 million has already been allocated to the project. This is just the remaining interest income.
So this is the residual interest that was made, and there'll be some interest on the 210 that's in there, so
Okay,
we'll
gotcha.
try to true it up before town meeting. and
Yeah,
then
So there'd be a
just close it
motion.
out.
10/31, we'll get the final interest payment, we'll know what it is on 11/1,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll update it on town meeting floor.
And so Fred, while I know that you don't like getting the extra substitution page, this is there's a sound reason as to why we would be doing it in this case, so.
And one of the things that,
When the numbers go up, we'll take a piece of paper.
I don't know, tell that to Fred, I don't know, I always get worried anytime I get something with a colored page, don't
one of the
worry.
things that we'll monitor, and I'll talk with the treasurer and assistant treasurers to make sure that when this extra 200,000 goes into the project, doesn't mean that the project goes up to 18,700. It stays at the 18,550 that we have, and we just borrow less.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Do we need to vote since it's not a final figure?
Well, I mean, I think the vote is whether or not you approve of the article. So the article of whether it be 410, yeah, or I should say whether it's 210,000 or whether it be 250,000. I think you can still vote it. I
Okay,
think.
let's vote it. I recommend.
Motion?
Yes.
I'll second, even though we're going to have a colored paper. How's that from team play?
Very nice. That's very nice.
I hope we don't have to have the paper just for that.
I may. I don't know. We'll see. Typically, I
Motion and a second.
I fear that won't be the case. That'll be the case. So.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes.
All right. So Article 10, we talked a little bit earlier about the funding of for the renovation of 36 King Street. The estimated cost to be able to get to get the design completed, working with the PMBC on this, and having a bid in hand for the annual town meeting in May, we're estimating to be about 400,000. I'm still trying to confirm that because it's based upon the sort of preliminary schematic work that we had done in preparation for the May 2023 annual town meeting. So, but we're trying to basically have something and get funding through this so that we can get this up and running for the annual town meeting.
What are we going to do with the old barn?
Barn,
This building? What are we,
Okay,
I mean, what are
right.
we going to do with it? We're
So, yeah.
spending another 400,000 to do what?
so this is for the design for the renovation of 36 King Street.
36, excuse
Yes, so 36 King, right, for the Indian Hill property.
So we want bids in hand, which means they have to do design docs, which
Yeah.
costs money.
Right, and there has to be a bidding process.
200,000, and the project will only be 2 million, instead of giving them 400,000, so the project will be 4 million.
This is an estimate.
I mean,
that
I
Brian
just-
asked for.
I remember from town meeting, Mitt Wanzer stood up and made it sound like it was turnkey. Walk right in. And I'm surprised that the number is so high for renovation.
So it's a good question, Jen. I mean, I know you weren't present when we did our meeting prior to town meeting, so first and foremost, I mean, construction inflation is just crazy. I'd say to anybody, if you've been anyone who's priced out a project in your home recently and seeing what the cost for materials and labor has been, it's really no different than what we see on our own side. And I think it's something important for Finance Committee be keeping in mind if we start going down this road for Shaker Lane School, and it's a little daunting to see how much that change has been. The scope of what we're looking to do there really hasn't necessarily changed. At least what we'd be proposing to the PRCE, and they're going to be looking at this and providing their value added to this because they've got a lot of people with engineering expertise on that committee. But basically, it's to replace the roof, which has reached the end of its useful life, to look at the systems, probably, who are also probably close to the end of its useful life. We would be looking to basically be realigning some of the offices to meet the specific needs of the school administration, which would be on the second floor, and then PRCE, which would be on the first floor. And so that means we have to reduce some offices, provide some. This is the way the space is. It's almost like a barn a little bit. It's these broad, So we have to sort of customize it for the uses that we have. So I don't think we're doing anything necessarily that radical. Most of the time, it's about taking walls down, putting up other walls, but also then we're repainting everything. We're redoing floors. So when you start adding that stuff up, the building in general terms is in pretty good shape. But to be able to customize it for the needs that we have of these specific groups, it is going to be costly. I echo Fred's sentiment. I wish this were $2 million too. But one of the things I emphasize to anyone who will ever that I talk to, whether it be select boards or finance committees, when you start having to do work in public projects and that you're paying prevailing wage in any community, it's very expensive. If you compare with the cost that we have to incur versus, say, my colleagues in New Hampshire, where they're not going to be. It's a significantly different thing, and
Maybe they could come down here with all their building stuff.
maybe.
So much cheaper.
Oh, they,
Maybe, yeah.
But how much was the
If-
building purchased for? Do you recall?
So the
3.5, yeah.
3.5, and it was
Empty for 2 years now.
yeah.
It's
The-
2 years it's sitting empty. It
Yeah.
doesn't do a building. Also,
Right.
sitting on PMBC, the square footage that they've priced out for the senior center, I think it was, I'm not positive exactly, I think it was like 3 times what the price was for the library.
right.
I mean, I think
It's
it was.
close to $1,000 a square foot for the senior center.
Right.
Crazy,
So
absolutely crazy.
That's another reason why.
Well, to Jenna's point, though, I think that's one of the reasons that we didn't end up voting to recommend something last time, because we were all a little shocked by the amount, and I thought that there was going to be some maybe rejigging of what needed to be done or reevaluating.
And that's
anything like
and that, Jerry, is where PMBC would come in to be looking at that part of it and having their expertise in terms of helping inform what, I think what I've outlined is the general scope of what we'd be looking at, but ultimately what I'd be looking for is to hand this over to PMBC and see what they come at,
Because even like things like, obviously like the floors and the paint you want to do before they move in, but the roof maybe has, 5 more years or something that doesn't have to be now. So is that what they'll look at?
Yeah, they will. I mean, I just want to be very realistic with you on this point because, I'm a strong believer is if you're going to do something, especially when it comes to construction, to do it right because, I think they look at, I could see that potentially coming back, but they're already experiencing leaks in the building.
Well, I agree with you 100%, but that wasn't how it was pitched to us originally.
Oh,
It was $3.5 million and a little bit of renovation, and to spend equal amount on renovation or
No,
more isn't a little bit of renovation in my mind.
No, it's
So-
a good point, and I think that's why having involving the PMBC to sort of prove out some of those concepts, and maybe having to look at some aspects of the scope that we'd be able to.
Do we have to get these we have to get this first for them, and then they take?
No. I think what they would, I would think that they would be working, hand in hand with the architect in terms of what that
Getting to
scope
this.
should be and getting a better sense and it being a more iterative process through this would be my hope.
Right, because I remember us also besides being shocked at the total amount, that there were some items that we thought, whoa, these are absolutely nice to haves.
Mhm.
Right. And some of the stains on the roof, I know we talked about it, because we were like, is the roof leaking? And they said, oh, no, there was a sprinkler leak, and
Yeah.
that's been fixed, and,
And there've been other things too, Jerry. We've been through the building just recently and looking at the heating system, and there were, we found some leaks in the gas pipes that we were working on. So it's a 21,000 square foot building. It's large, and it's empty now, as you point out, a couple of years. So I think it's prudent for the town to come to terms with whatever they're going to do. And while there may be a few things here and there, Brian, that, that maybe can be got through, I just want to be very realistic to you that this, this is what, some, even just this basic fit out costs. So, so even, the scope of it really hasn't significantly changed from what we originally conceived of, what we would do. But, it's to have it work for what our needs are, we have to customize it. And I would tell you that when you compare what those costs will be vis-a-vis building new, which we're doing, $1,000 a square foot, I think I think this will be significantly less in the end.
Right, I can see PMBC scraping it from 4 million maybe to 3.95, but not to 2.
Yeah. So that's where the process would be. So, again,
will they come back and give you like a timeline and say, these things you have to do now, these things?
They may. I mean, I
How does it
I could see the PMBC coming back potentially and trying to do it in phases. I mean, from having been through other building projects, it would be my feeling like if you're going to do it, again, do it right the first time, be able to make it comfortable. Because, I think you also have to keep in mind, too, that, I'm trying to take care of staff, and that, and take care of staff means that they're comfortable and excited about the building that they're moving into. That's got its own set of challenges, because if people feel like that, okay, we just, we moved you into the, the crawl space in grandma's house. I mean, it's going to be, that has its own set of issues too. So, and not that I'm looking to, build, something grandiose within that, but, I want to have something, that's a professional space that reflects the professionals we're putting into the building.
And to put it in perspective, with the senior center at about 18 or 19,000 square feet is $1,000 a square foot, which blows my mind. This, even if we spent the entire 4 million plus the 3.5 that we've already put into it, it's about $350 to $370 a square foot. Still seems like a lot, but it's not $1,000 a square foot. So from that standpoint, you can say, maybe it's not all that super crazy, but municipal projects, to your point, are just out of control. It's just unbelievable.
So maybe if I could ask for the Finance Committee if you could take a pass on this and vote it next Monday, just because I'm still trying to clarify whether 400,000 is where it needs to be. So if we could, if you wouldn't mind taking, passing over that at this time, that would be helpful.
One of the things, and I was just thinking of this, Ryan, and I want to throw a monkey wrench in the planning, but transferring, like in number 10, transferring from capital stabilization for this, and number 14, transferring it from capital stabilization for the ambulance. Each of those is going to require a 2/3 vote.
Mhm.
If we change those to make the funding source the overlay reserve and just net it against the 4 million,
Mm-hmm.
that way you have no articles basically that are going to require a 2/3 vote.
That's a good point. That's a good
Right.
point.
The only thing we need to remember, if we start netting things against that 4
4
million,
million, you could be
you
tightening.
kind of lose track that 4 million really went into this account for 36 King.
Right.
That's the only advantage of it, because you start netting, so we're down, say 600,000, so now it's 3,000,004 going in on that article, where we are saying it should be really 4 million. See my point? So the board, if we go that route, which we may want to, so we don't have to get 2/3 votes, but we need to make sure that the two boards are clear that it's really 4 million that we're setting aside for this project.
The other thing though, Steve, is there's a reason that those kind of things require a two-thirds vote.
Right.
So just from conceptually, I'm actually okay with saying, hey, town, we need a two-thirds vote for this.
That you really want a new ambulance, you know?
Well, they're gonna have the say in the new ambulance anyways.
I'm sorry?
They're gonna vote on it anyways.
Oh, absolutely, but the pulse is different at 2/3. And
Right. It's a high,
51%.
Just make
it's a higher standard for big bucks, which I think is appropriate.
All right,
It may take us 3 hours to go through the vote because we don't have the clickers, but to be able to do that,
Well, then we'll do the clicker article after that. and
I
say,
guess
oh.
so. I guess so. See, that's right. 3 hours of your life you're not going to get back. So there you go. But okay, we can take that as
So we'll
keep it
hold
the
that.
same. Okay.
okay.
you can withhold your click until the last second.
There you go. There you go. Article 11 is a request to amend the prior town meeting article to support the senior center project to allow for reallocation of funding for design and construction services. So I think what's the amount that, Steve, what was the amount set aside right now? It was like one, I think it was like one.
So there was 2 borrowing articles for the senior center. The first one for $1.5 million specifically said design dollars. We didn't spend all those design dollars. We want to change the language from just design to design and construction. So we're able to funnel that into the project. It's already being looked at as part of the project. So this is just the formality to get those monies into the project to use.
Should probably be amending it to add the design, to maybe the design to design, to amend the article to add and construction, something along those lines, yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Hey, says you think I told you we took a seat.
It's all good.
All right, see. All right, how are you?
Good.
Nice to see you. You too.
Now we've got him boxed in, he can't get out.
There you go. No escape for me. Yeah, that's it.
So I think we can vote on that one. That's, I have a motion to recommend.
I make a motion to recommend number 11. Article
Second,
number 11.
anybody?
Second.
Jerry, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, good. Okay, next up is the purchase of the Webster property. So, just to, I don't know where to even begin on this one. The town has been approached about the sale of the Webster property. It's currently open space, and there's been a proposal for the town to purchase said property. The town has, with the cooperation of the property owner, done an appraisal on the property. The owner, I think, has some questions about whether or not the appraisal is an accurate reflection of what his property is worth. And so, as I understand it, the property owner is currently working to present a purchase and sale agreement to the town, or not to the town, but with another entity, and then provide the town with the right of first refusal on that purchase and sale. So at this point, we do not know what that amount would be. So I think taking a vote on it at this point would sort of be very challenging for you, but I wanted to at least give you an update on.
Do we know what the appraisal was that we got?
Steve, help me out. I think it was but somewhere around 600,000, I think.
The number I recall is like 632.
That sounds right.
What's the actual address there?
I do not know. It's up by the train station, I believe. So there's more to be coming forward. So I wouldn't ask for a vote on this. It is really now incumbent upon the property owner to provide this, the town with some sort of formal right of first refusal on this, based upon what we hope to be, what we anticipate to be, I should say, a legitimate offer being made to them.
Is there a
Well,
specific
the
plan for
appraise-
this, or is
go
it
ahead.
gonna go to conservation or open?
So the proposal would be that it would be going to the Conservation Commission. So at the meeting on, at the Select Board meeting on Monday, the representatives from the Conservation Commission will be coming to present this article. It's my understanding that they have voted on this and are supportive of wanting to purchase the parcel. But
At
Was that
what
an
price
amount
are they, yeah, at what price are they,
I think you can,
they
knowing
want?
you're going to be at that meeting, Fred, I think that's a great question.
How can you prove that that no price?
No, yeah, and I don't think that's what we'd be asking. I think the idea of having this here tonight was to be able to provide the Finance Committee with an update in terms of what the approach would be. But, you know, I think there's a lot of questions that both you and the Select Board still have regarding the pricing and you know, and the value of this specific parcel within, you know, all the other things that the town, you know,
Okay.
that's going on. So,
Right, does it abut other properties or what, like what's strategic?
as I understand it, there's a bobcat habitat on it. But one of the reasons, Tyler, I think, as to why the property didn't appraise maybe as high as they thought was there's some concern, well, not concerns, but that when the property was flagged in terms of where the wetlands were, that more of the property was, well, I don't know more, some of the property was wet, and so when a property's wet, you can't build anything on it, and there's setbacks required on it, which meant that the buildable component on the property was smaller than, and thus the value of it than to be anything other than conservation property is somewhat limited.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
I think, but I'll let the Conservation Commission make that presentation to you and make that pitch.
Do you know the acreage offhand?
36 comes
So I was going to say like around 40, right?
Okay, fair enough. Yep.
Yeah. So
Darlene, you have any updates that we don't know about?
No, we haven't heard anything. We just heard that there was something maybe forthcoming, but I haven't heard from Amy at all.
yeah. So, and again, as I understand it, Chase will be coming to our meeting, the Select Board meeting next Monday, and you know, giving his update and seeing where we're at. So this may be the type of thing where we may not have that information in hand, and depending on what the Select Board wants to do in terms of including it as an article, this could be another substitute page. So,
Are they gonna be looking for it all to be funded with CPC funds, or?
it's another question. I mean, I think they've had conversations with you
Yeah, I mean, we
about
said that we
this.
were generally supportive of it and to continue, but we that was real early on.
Mhm, right,
So I don't even think we've heard this information,
Okay.
right.
you know, on the sidewalk, but.
But not necessarily looking for additional funding from the town, other than to approve CPC funding, is what you're
Well, were
anticipating?
they throwing a number around when they talked to you? or-
Well, way back, this was a long time ago, and it was, I think they were talking about 1.8 or something. I think he was hoping to get something.
So only 3 times what it's appraised for?
Well, I think he believed
nice
the
size.
appraisal was gonna be higher.
Yep. Okay.
25 houses rather than 4, which would be a
Yep.
difference.
Okay.
So more to come on the Webster property.
Yep.
So, but that's fine.
That's
Something
something
of that dollar amount, we would be placing debt, and CPC would be funding the debt service.
Okay.
So, so to Jerry's point, I don't think, I mean, ultimately, the funding sources and the recommendations of those funding sources come from, you know, from the Finance Committee, working collaboratively with the Select Board. But I don't think that there was anything else, at least, that was discussed at this point about alternative funding sources other than paying the debt service from the CPC at this point. So, next article, 13 and 14 are somewhat related to one another. The request under 13 is to rescind Article 15 from the October 17th, 2020 special town meeting to purchase an ambulance and accessories and related costs. I think the idea was that we'd be borrowing at that time, and it turns out that we, I think I had paid cash for it from what Steve and I talked about. So anytime we are borrowing that we no longer need, we rescind said borrowing, and can allows us to borrow more for other things that we actually need. So that I'll take 14 with it. 14 is request to fund an ambulance. This is a conversation that Steve and I separately had with, I think, or maybe, no, actually, we collectively spoke with the chief about this. Their backup ambulance is currently in poor condition. I think there's some concerns and desire to want to get out ahead of that. Ideally, the reason we have the ambulance fund is that the ambulance fund can basically provide sufficient funding to fund all of our ambulances moving forward. It's kind of structured in that way. At this point, mainly because of COVID, and when the income that was taken in from ambulance revenue at that time was significantly less than where we were, at. So there was really 2, maybe 3-year period where those numbers really dipped down. So really what you're seeing here is a bit of a COVID tax here in this instance. So what we're proposing is to fund a portion of the ambulance, $175,000, through the capital stabilization, and the balance from the ambulance fund. Our hope is, and looking at the numbers and talking to the chief about that in terms of where the cash flow is, by not doing everything out of the ambulance fund, our hope is that, I think it's in a year or two's time, I think is when they'll be looking to come back for another ambulance, that they'll be able to be hopefully funded entirely from the ambulance fund at that time.
Well, maybe they shouldn't come back unless it's fully funded.
I guess, so Article 13 was, so when we authorized that borrowing, the ambulance cost $225,000, right? So that was to fund one ambulance, but now.
I think that was partial,
Yeah, I don't think that wasn't
part of
full
the
cost.
cost. So it was kind of a split thing like this,
Right, yeah.
but we funded the borrowing piece through cash at that point in time.
Okay. So are there additional savings besides, like, if we authorized 225 in borrowing, but then if it was the same price, do we have 200 grand in the cap plan? I just can't remember, like, where's the rest of that money coming from? Is that going to flow back to free cash or something?
No, there's nothing in borrowing that comes back as free cash. It was,
Right, but.
Yeah, but that wasn't the
right,
full
but
amount.
if the borrowing was 225 and the cost was, I mean, the cost now is 425, right? So how are we funding the other 200 grand?
Back then?
Yeah, because we never
it
bought
had
it, right?
come out of stabilization at the
Okay.
time.
Yeah. The last one, I think. did.
This is when I was on my way out.
Yeah, no, I just, yeah, really, right. Because then they're like, yeah, we probably funded out of stabilization, but we never spent it, I guess at that point, right? So,
They bought a new ambulance. We just didn't borrow to get it. This last ambulance that they bought,
Okay.
we just didn't borrow for it, that's all.
If you're gonna, one thing that would be really helpful on this kind of sheet, and this kind of sheet is great, but as we say, yeah, let's take another 175 out of cap stabilization, it'd be great if up here we had a list of the current, before any of this happened, balances in all the cap stabilizations. All of the various stabilization funds. Because it's like, okay, so if we do 14, we take 175 out of cap stabilization. Where are we at that point? How much is left?
I recall we're starting at around 3.9 million,
Right, we just put in 4.
so that's 7.9.
Okay, but just
Right.
moving forward, it'd be great to have, if it's easy to do, the list of the various, the starting balances of this, just so I can. Okay.
If I were to do that, Brian, I'd probably put it in the second page where we have the tally, that you could then put the balances in there. And
Sure,
the
sure.
total.
However is easy, man.
Okay. So 13 and 14 are somewhat connected, so is there anyone else with any other questions on that? We did say we were going to keep the 175 in the capital stabilization fund, thus necessitating a 2/3 vote on that. Correct?
Do you have a motion for 13 and 14?
I move that the Finance Committee supports Articles 13 and 14 on the November 1st special time meeting.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Article 15, so this is a request for a mower attachment on a trackless machine. So I will tell you, share with you all, that Steve Yonley came to me about this. I was a little skeptical in the beginning because what do we keep on hearing the same theme? Let's talk about bringing things in cycle, and this is something that not only is it not in cycle, isn't on our capital plan. Two strikes against it. So, needless to say, that it took some convincing to have to want to move forward with this. So, the thing to keep in mind with this is Steve is a relatively new DPW director, and that's part of what he's been doing the first few years, is being able to understand and assess his infrastructure and tools that he has to do his job. And we have this trackless machine, which is used at this point exclusively for sidewalk plowing. So basically this machine is being used exclusively in the winter. And one of the things that Steve has had from experience in Chelmsford is that these machines also allow for use of attachments on them. So that basically, if we had that, then we would have the capacity to be able to take the trackless out in the summer. So there's more utility in that. We can then use it during the summertime. We're also using the vehicle, which is also important because vehicles need to be, anything that sits for 9 months, good things don't come, right? We would put that theme with the 36 King Street. The equipment and buildings, same sort of thing. They have to be used to be able to be functional. So the other thing that this provides is that the cutting mechanism happens on the front end of it, so the drivers, when they're looking forward, they can see that, as opposed to they do have mowing attachments in the backhoes, but a lot of times when they're doing that, they're driving in one way, but at the same time looking back and determining is the mower in where it should be. And so it isn't as functional. So I think there's some other functionality that can be provided on this. So I don't know, maybe Steve got me on a good day, but I thought that one of the reasons we wanted to bring this to the special versus the annual is that funding on the annual means that that funding will be available as of July 1. So in this case, if this was to be successful on the annual town meeting and got through the capital funding process, you now have you don't even have the mower. You would have the capacity to go out and purchase said mower on July 1 of 2024. Whereas with the special, if this is voted in November, this can be in place and we can use it for the entire spring and the cutting season. So that's why that request is being made before you today, and we're proposing that it be taken out of the capital stabilization fund. It's a 2/3 vote, so I guess that it's another question. But to Brian's point, if this isn't necessarily a bigger thing, but if we think it should be something that could be supported, then it may be something that the board may eventually choose to put as part of our consolidated vote, consent agenda, maybe potentially.
Yeah, 40K doesn't need 2/3, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
I think it makes sense. I mean, Steve was super conservative and in it has even in the regular cycle, right?
Pretty much,
I think I respect that he's taking the time to figure it out before he's asking for a bunch of stuff.
And I think he's thinking of it as a utility aspect, and that he can be able to say, take a vehicle that otherwise would be parked, and he can then assign staff to, and could be more functional for us. So, yeah. So, any other questions?
Have a motion?
I'd like to hear what the selectmen want to do with it, personally. Anybody else?
I'm fine with deferring till Monday.
To Monday?
Well,
The 18th or whatever it is, yeah.
That's Monday.
Next few do not, the next few aren't really financial in nature, but I'll just give you a quick update. So Article 16 is a request to amend the town code regarding the town administrator selection committee. So I think the request there would be to keep the town administrator search committee, but to provide an "and" to that, which would basically be, the "and" would be that if the select board were to want to impart another process, that would be at the discretion of the select board at that time. So I think that, and the reason for that is that I think the board, when with this recent experience, has felt a little hamstrung in terms of what the code is. I would remind everybody that Anthony left at the end of March. It is now the beginning of September. So, and I had a lot less gray hair when I started that process. So, so that's something to keep in mind. So I think it's something that would provide them for more flexibility. Not that they would get rid of the town administrator selection committee, but give the board more options for them. So. The next item, this is something that was reminded by Steve, is that town code currently states that the director of finance and budget must also have the title of either treasurer collector or town accountant. We are finding, as are many municipalities, the capacity to find finance directors to be extremely challenging. When we went out last time, we had hired a recruitment firm to assist us in that endeavor, and they found, after a worldwide search, 0 applicants. So the reason we were able to bring in the individual that we did that individual had a prior working relationship with Anthony, saw the advertisement that was out there, but wasn't contacted by the recruiter, and that connection was made, and that's how we had brought Patty Moore on board at that time. And so Patty has moved on, and I don't think any of the components that have been in there before have changed. It's still really challenging to find someone with that particular skill set. So one of the things that we are looking into would be the capacity, and I think the request here would be to add the assistant town administrator to have the capacity to also have the title of finance director to provide that flexibility. Because if we're hamstrung by only finding someone who had the skill of being a town accountant and the finance director, I'm a little concerned about our capacity to actually find anyone. So that's why we're putting the request forward.
And we have 2 relatively new people in both those positions that aren't ready to be finance directors.
Have we started searching again yet, or we're still waiting?
For
Finance director.
So finance. So we haven't put anything out with the understanding that we would be putting this article forward, as well as potentially looking at doing a new job description for the assistant town administrator position. So that position would also then have the dual role of assistant town administrator and finance director. We're starting to see that in other municipalities, that having someone in the TA's office with that explicit role and responsibility. So it's just brutally hard to find people with that skill set. And
But I mean, are we actively looking for a finance director yet? I know you had said we didn't want to go back out.
We haven't. No, we haven't. And I think that we're, again, with having still some, questions about who the TA would be. I think there's a question about, is that open question? Is the open question, if we go out, is that just another, hiring a recruiter and getting nothing again? So I think that sometimes the smartest action you can take is no action. So we brought in an interim finance director named Steve Cirillo. He is basically in the office 1 day a week. He's kind of been assisting us and helping provide a big picture, and really most importantly getting year-end closeout in place and speaking with the auditor and getting that scheduled and things like that. It's been helpful, but it's not a perfect solution, Jerry, but it's the best we can do right now under the circumstances. No, it's a reasonable question. So.
Yeah. We've kind of gone down this road in the past, haven't we, in town? Like, at one point, wasn't Bonnie like the assistant town administrator for budget and finance? It's like we've had.
Bonnie was assistant town administrator, but she was also town accountant.
Right, okay. Oh, okay. So that's okay. So she served both roles and the accountant role as well. Okay, got it. Thanks.
Right.
So this isn't doesn't have a dollar amount to it, but it is financial in nature. I think we should recommend. So I'll take a motion.
Move that we
That's what,
recommend.
16?
Go ahead.
Not good at
17.
17, okay.
Okay. Move that we recommend 17.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Next item is the Foster Street right-of-way takings. So we're currently working with town council to get that language in place. This is the area near the MBTA station. So the town, in order to build sidewalks in this area, would be having to take some portions of people's property. Mainly, it's, from what Steve Yonley informs me, it's mainly temporary easements. We're not asking for any money at this town meeting for this because Steve believes he can cover this through his highway his highway construction budget in the FY24 budget. So, this is kind of one of those other borderline articles as to whether or not the finance committee would want to vote, because, again, we...
So is this from the train station up to Taylor?
I believe so.
Or
Fred, I
is it
think-
both directions?
I believe it's in both directions. I don't know specifically, but it's in that general vicinity, and it's part of, again, trying to improve pedestrian interaction with the station.
As part of that project, is there any looking at the traffic flow within the station? Because back in the before days, I used to take that train, and that the traffic flow could not have been designed worse.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know, Brian. I don't know if that's the case in this instance. I do know that this is part of like MassDOT. It's a combined MassDOT town project. So I do not know the answer to that question offhand.
Because it used to be that all it took is one person who wanted to live park, and nobody could get in. I mean, it was a nightmare.
Yeah, it almost extends all the way to Foster, right? I mean, you have the playing Frogger across Harwood trying to cross as the train's gotten out, right? I mean, there's a lot of areas where it's
Right.
tough.
So I'll ask that question when we get to where we can, when we get to town meeting or something. When we can ask.
Okay. All right. So, so I don't know, Steve, if you want to take a vote on this, but it's up to you.
Is Steve coming to the selectmen's meeting?
I can ask Steve.
That's great. That's great then.
Okay. Why don't we put that as maybe just a pass and bring him to talk about it? Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Item 19 is a request to transfer $385,000 from raise and appropriate for the feasibility study and design phases of the Shaker Lane Elementary School. So currently, we have $700,000 set aside from a prior article, and we are in the process now. We've gone out to bid and have received and have appointed or identified a vendor who would be serving as our OPM on this project. Just yesterday, we received the price proposal from them. It was generally within the realm of what we thought that might be, but we also have other costs as it relates to the feasibility study. The OPM is only one portion of that. So what we are proposing here is we already have our $700,000 set aside. This would supplement the $700,000 and provide us what we think will be the full costs of the feasibility study and the design phase for the Shaker Lane Elementary School. So I'm meeting tomorrow night with the Shaker Lane School Construction Committee. Steve is on that. We'll be giving an update on where we're at. But, I work with Steve and coming up with what we think would be a conservative number, so we wouldn't have to come back to town meeting on this. And we think between the two numbers, that should be good to go. Keep in mind that there is a reimbursement rate associated with that. It's 48.6%, I think. So monies that we expend, we will then be getting back for us. And so we would have that we would then hopefully be applying against further phases of the project. So, but this allows us to have all that funding in place, similar to what we would be doing when we presumably, if we move forward in this and for the construction of the Shaker Lane project, we would be, say it's, argument's like $1 million. We say, okay, well, we need to, even though there's a reimbursement rate, we have to, the MSBA requires us to bond up to that entire amount, and that's a requirement on us, and it's similar in this instance, what we're looking to do.
So, a couple of things with this article, and Ryan mentioned that the building committee is meeting tomorrow night. They haven't asked the town for more money yet. So, the process was they interviewed the OPM and talked with MSBA. We had set aside if you remember, we originally set aside $400,000. It went up to $700,000 based on MSBA's recommendation. Now MSBA is recommending $1.2 million for a potential school the size of Shaker, that Shaker Lane needs to be, as what the cost has been for this project for similar size schools. Because we submitted a budget of $700,000 to the MSBA for this piece of the pie, our reimbursement is only on $700,000.
Even though they recommended we go up.
Even though we potentially could be putting more money into this. So this more money is 100% on the town. So the building committee hasn't seen this 385. It's basically money that we have come out of that cherry sheet
Yeah.
that we have available. So I think what my job and Ryan's job, and I'll talk to Chuck DeCoste tomorrow, he's also on the building committee, let them know what this number is, and if the building committee wants more money, we need to target this, or else we would have to find some other funding source for additional funds. And the only other place we could do that is pull more money out of capital stabilization. So I think this is $1 million for this feasibility study. It's a little bit over $1 million now for this feasibility study, $1,085,000. Based on their recommendation of 1.2, plus the OPM on the interviews, and Chuck mentioned this at the last meeting, said they could possibly make this work, right, at a lower amount.
This
Doesn't
includes
need to be
design as
1.2.
well, though, or just feasibility?
It's
Just feasibility.
feasibility.
So, yeah, I think that's important to emphasize. We want to limit expectations because that is a separate part of the expense. So really what the feasibility study is going to be looking at is, the key question for Shaker Lane is either rehabilitation or new build. And that's going to be a big part of it, but it's informed by conversations that they have with the community, the school community specifically, about what the goals are for what the education goals will be, and how that then feeds into what the design will become.
So this original $700,000 that we get, the 46% back, what of the future expenses as they get submitted, maybe in the same fashion, is there a percent back on those as well? I guess I'm just
The
wondering if there's a way
reimbursement rate for the project is the
to
whole
roll
thing.
this into the
Something
project
else.
money so that it can get that return.
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, when you deal with MSBA, they keep track of,
Yeah.
and I've gone through this with a couple of schools now. They keep track of every expense and what it was for and how it was allocated and how it was budgeted, so believe we
likely.
could sneak
Okay.
things in like
It's a
that.
48% reimbursement rate would be what we'd anticipate for the entire project
Okay.
and all the expenses.
But this would not have any, it would have zero.
So this is, I think, the 700,000,
Right, this 385.
but
Would
then
not,
385,
right.
I think, from Steve said, right? So, again, I think maybe if we could maybe take a pass on this, because
Right.
then we'd have a bite at the apple, Steve, to be able to have the Shaker Lane School Building Committee look at this, vote on something.
Vote on
And-
something.
and-
Well, they may vote to keep the 700,000.
Right.
But the money is available in case.
Mhm.
So we needed to basically do our due diligence and see what the funding source would be and whether monies were available for it.
Right. So if it's okay, we'll just take a pass on that. We'll talk about that on Monday night at the joint meeting.
And if we don't spend that money now, let's not spend it elsewhere until we know.
Okay. Article 20 is something that the Select Board has already voted on in favor to increase the CPC from 1% to 2%.
Did they vote that? They voted that night to put it on the warrant.
They'll put it on the warrant. Yeah, I suppose they could
They
make a...
didn't vote to.
They didn't vote to
approve
support it or approve it, right?
Okay, I stand corrected. So it was a long, confusing night, so that's fine. So yeah, that's the...
So I don't expect a vote tonight, but we should probably discuss this so we have some type of agreement or at least notion of where we're going to go on Monday night with this. What are people's feelings on the increase?
Have any of our-
Potential increase.
I'm just thinking, I don't know that I have any new information or any new data since last time we had this discussion.
I don't think there is any.
Other than we miraculously came up with a 1% out of town money to go into the CPC.
Right,
For that
And it's not
400.
miraculous. The money was there, it was available. It was just a mechanism that we could use to satisfy both the purchase and the deposit into CPC
Right,
to
but
get
we
the extra
haven't done
match.
that for the last 2 or 3 years.
And that is exactly my point when I argue against this, is we haven't sat down as a group between us and the select board to put a plan in place and really take a hard look at the capital plan that we do each year. And if there are things that,
sense.
other than vehicles and things going on to the capital plan, are there other projects that need to be looked at to put into this plan? And that we at least see potentially what we can have on the plate to expend over the next few years. And then we have something to plan to say, okay, we can deposit this money into CPC. We were going to spend it out of capital stabilization anyways, or we were saving for this, or we know this is happening a couple of years down the road. We haven't gone through that process.
Right.
So in my mind, how can we ask the taxpayer to put up more dollars if we haven't done the effort on our part to try and make this work on our own? Are we going to get to 2% every year? No. I could say that right out. No, we're not. Are we going to be able to fund everything the CPC wants? I believe we can. Because in all the years we've had this, we have not funded something that's come from CPC to us. It hasn't happened.
Right.
Yeah, I think my head's kind of in the same place, right? I mean, it's like the more is better philosophy when you don't know what it's allocated towards. It's tough, right? Because if you had infinite funding for conservation, then we'd spend it, right? If we're not budgeting and planning towards a goal of whatever it is, $10,000 a year, $100,000 a year, you know, we just don't have
Right.
a goal that
So
we want
we
to
have
invest.
$4 million in overlay money that we're putting to capital stabilization. We could have easily said, let's put $1 million of that into CPC. Well, what's it going to do there? It just sits there. And we lose the ability to spend it on things like Indian Hill. But if there was a plan in place that says, okay, a couple of years down the road, we know this purchase is coming, or we're planning to build this field, or something is going to happen, then we can say, okay, let's start siphoning some money from cap stabilization or from free cash every year into CPC for this direct reason. We haven't gone through that exercise yet. And I believe we owe it to the townspeople to go through that exercise first. If we fail, then we go back to the town and say, we tried, we couldn't do it, we'd like an extra 1%. But until we prove that we can't, I'm totally against this.
And I'd say, Ken, I would be happier if we were able to go on Monday with a proposal to the select board of some policy statements about tweaking some of the per policy payments we make to the various stabilization funds.
It's already in our policy. It's here. So the CPC appendix that was written by Keith way back when, that shame on us, we don't follow, actually refers back to the free cash policy and says, as part of the discussion on free cash, when we get to capital, the capital component, we should be pushing money into CPC as needed. It also says a blend, and this is page 3 of 4 of the policy. Number 1, blended CPA long-range plan. The Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee, and CPC shall annually adopt, review, and update a long-range plan for use of blended CPA funds over the next 10 to 20 years, including the 1% CPA property tax surcharge.
Hey, let's
What
do that.
haven't we done?
Let's do that.
So until we do what we said we're going to do, how can we ask the town to fund more?
Okay, so let's
Let's do it.
well, let's say that on Monday, let's say to the select board, because they're going to pressure us just to approve, say, look, this is
Absolutely.
our response. We already have a policy. We want to follow the policy.
Absolutely. I am totally willing to sit down with the select board and CPC and follow this policy and put a plan in place. We don't have to name the open space lots that we want to purchase. We can say in our heads what those dollar amounts would be and how we're going to get to there and what years we want those buckets. We don't have to have, just like with, if this property goes through this time, we don't have to have that full amount sitting in those buckets. We just need a couple of years worth of debt service there. And then we can work to put more money in, so as those bands come down, we have the money to pay those things down over time.
Sure.
That's all we need. We don't need to shove $3 million into CPC. Yes, it's great to have the match, and it's free money, but we can do it within reason for the town. That's my argument.
Well, seeing that we have a policy, that's what I was lobbying for, so I'm fine.
And the other thing I'd like to sort of add here is the last couple of years, I guess, the fairly large amounts of money that has gone out of CPC to the Affordable Housing Trust. And,
Absolutely.
you know, that limits CPC's ability to support something that comes up in that area.
Because they're able to move money between buckets.
Right.
Right. So, my suggestion, and I'll make this to the select board and to your committee, is if you're the gatekeeper for the Affordable Housing Trust, basically, to fund them, if I were you, I'd be asking the Affordable Housing Trust for a budget each year. Tell me what you need to fund, just like we're saying to you, tell us what you need to fund. Have them tell you what they need to fund. And by the way, you're sitting on $1.5 million. That's part of your budget. Until you need extra money, we're going to keep it in the CPC fund. Because once it goes there, it's out of our control, totally. So I'd put the onus on the CPC committee to ask for a budget, or even the select board to ask for a budget. Or else. Somebody should be getting a budget
Yeah,
from
no,
them.
I mean, we have done that, and we get an annual report every year to make sure, you know, what they are spending on, because this has come up in the past. But I think it's the same as the CPA, you know, it's trying to build, it's like a savings account for things that you don't plan for. And that's kind of the beauty of CPA is that we
But
have
I would
that.
rather, those funds that are allocated to that bucket, that housing bucket, sit with you than with the Affordable Housing Trust. And then as they need it, it comes out of you. Because you're the gatekeeper for those funds. Once they leave you,
Yeah.
they're
Well,
gone.
I mean, that's something that, you know, CPA would have to talk, and we'd have to talk about, because we've been, obviously, most of it goes to open space, and then we tend to be more even among the other three buckets. And
I'm not
then
saying you
those
shouldn't be
advocates-
even. I'm not saying you shouldn't be
No, I
even
know,
between
and
the
the
buckets.
advocates
I'm saying you
have
should
what
keep
they
that
want.
bucket to yourself.
Well, yeah, until there's a specific project or cost to expend it, right?
Right, I mean, other than this 200,000 that they're spending for the Habitat for Humanity thing, right? They do those vouchers, which is, what did they say, 60,000 a year or something like that?
Yeah, which is going down now.
And they have $1 million.
And every year we keep giving them more.
Right.
So I think, you know, it's time to at least understand where the money is
Yeah.
and whatnot. And to Steve's point, if you have it and something really big comes up and we need to move it from one bucket to another, you can do that. You're authorized to do that. But once it goes out the door, it's out the door.
And meanwhile,
That little-
the interest that's for the total funds that we're earning in our bank accounts stay with the CPC fund and don't go to the Affordable Housing Trust. Because it's a separate bank account for that.
Right, for that category, but the other categories, I mean, we don't want to, like, open space, wouldn't it be better if we could have more revenue coming? I mean, you guys just funded 400,000, but that's not even 1%. That doesn't even hit 1% of the.
399 was.
399 was your
what you,
1%.
Was your 1% in 2023.
We were given 466 was the amount. that
What we
were-
billed, because I asked the tax collector, what we billed was 399,000.
All right. That was this year, though. And then, I mean, this overlay sounds like it's a one-off, so that doesn't come in next year, so then we don't get anything unless you can find something?
This-
I mean, wouldn't
That's
we
why
rather
we're
have
gonna
a-
sit down and do a plan.
Yes, but a plan, can we get that done for next year? That we never get plans done in time.
We need to make sure that we do this.
Do
I mean,
something,
it
right?
just seems like it's an expected, I mean, if we could raise it another %, we would have guaranteed money coming in.
To do what with?
Well, that's the thing is, you know, what's the next open, so if we buy the Webster property, what's the next open space? I mean, we talk about these landowners that have, you know, are aging out. So is more land gonna come on?
Well,
We won't know that.
It-
but, yeah, I mean, I think though, like, if during our planning, we came up with a goal of, okay, you know, we want to buy whatever it is, $100,000 a year in open space. That's something where we can identify
That's a
the
plan.
amount of money we need to put aside, right? Versus, you know, we don't have a goal for how much open space we're going to acquire, and something comes on the market for $1 million, and we didn't, you know, now just because it's available, we're going to spend $1 million first. Calibrating that against, okay, our goal was to spend 400,000, this is $1 million, like, it's tough, right? It's
Right,
tough.
but guaranteeing putting that aside, if we have the new school, if we have, I mean, the senior center, if we have Indian Hill, I mean, all this is gonna come out of the budget, that's not gonna be left over for CPA to get a bite of.
But if we do what we're supposed to be doing for our policy, and we follow our policy for just about everything else, for some reason, we don't do this piece of it. We need to incorporate this piece, and it becomes part of the annual calculation that we do when we divvy up free cash. It's one of the components, and as long as we can come up with a plan, we need money to do this. By the way, there could be, you know, 50 acres a year that we want to purchase, and here's a ballpark price. All we need is a couple of years debt service in there, initially until the purchase is done, and then you start funneling the cash in to pay for the property. It can be done. We need to give it a try. My belief is we need to give it a try before we ask the taxpayer to divvy up another 1% on this. That's my feeling.
I guess I'm dubious that it will get done.
But it's on us to do it. It's on your committee, our committee, and the select board to work together to make sure it gets done. And if we don't, then we go back to town meeting.
Now, the other thing that someone mentioned is this is a two-part process. We have to go through town meeting and then go on the ballot in the spring. If we take this to November, we could always not put it on the ballot, just in case. I mean, is that something that we can get done before next May? I mean, how long is this planning process going to take? Is it
This year's budget cycle, we'll
This
do
year's
it
budget
through
cycle?
this year's budget cycle. I mean, our goal should be, at May town meeting, there is some allocation of free cash that would normally go to capital stabilization that gets put into CPC. Is it going to be 2%? No. Is it going to be close to 1%? Possibly. But it's something.
And if it doesn't happen,
We need to make sure that it does.
right, and, because Park and Rec are the ones that always have the big projects. They're always, and the town is always sending them to CPA to be funded. So if we can't fund those, and we may have to say that we can't fund those.
If it's a
And then we'll have to
project
go through
that,
the regular
if it's a
capital
project
process.
that's being referred to you by the select board, means it passed the capital project between our boards.
Yeah.
And if it does that, that means we have the funding, which means we could ship that money to CPC.
Yeah, and I think to what you said too, like, I think CPC is one of the areas where we haven't had to say no. Like, I mean, through the budget process every year, there's an immense number of things that aren't funded every year, right? So, I mean, I think CPC does an awesome job of supporting all that stuff, but I think that's where some of us are struggling, is doing the cycle every year. There's so many things that we're pushing out to the next year and the next year that we're not.
Well, I think that's what we're
funding
seeing.
that are
We're seeing
funding, right?
more, especially from Park and Rec, hearing more and more that we need to fund. And I think that was part of the problem.
But they're not coming to us with anything. There's no projects from Park and Rec sitting in front of us that we're saying no to. We see 2 here for lights and for the tennis courts.
Right.
Other than that, there's nothing in front of us
Right.
in the
No.
capital plan
No.
for Park and Rec.
There will be.
Well, I think that's what the plan.
And that's good. That's why we plan.
Right.
That's why we need to do more in our capital plan than we do currently. We can't just look 1 year like we have been in the past. We ask the departments to give us 5 years. We ignore the other 4 years. We're looking this year. What can we fund? What do we have available? And we say, yeah, there's a lot of money out there, sitting out there. We never say, how are we going to fund it? What do we need to do? What realistically do we need to push out to what years? We need to do a better job.
I mean, I'd hate to miss the opportunity, but can't sway you, I guess.
That's me. That's
I think we're,
other people.
I think we're consensus. I mean,
You two haven't said anything.
I mean, I did a little bit the last meeting, but the TIF that was taken away that we have in this income now, this is something that going forward is going to be income on an
It's
annual
just
basis.
in the regular levy now. It's
Okay.
not extra money every year.
Not extra money, but it's additional money based before what we had based our revenues on before. It's like an increase in revenues than what we had
You
used
see
before.
the increase in available levy
Yeah.
capacity this
Okay.
year. Yes.
I mean, I think we can do that.
The planning.
Yeah.
I think we need to do what we say we're going to do. And shame on us again for not doing all of this.
And I think we're coming out and saying if during this budget cycle we don't appear to be doing it, please call us on it.
Absolutely.
Or anybody.
Absolutely. Now, the select board may have a different opinion. That's all. Jenna?
I think it costs money to buy nice things. And it sounds, as you've said, that anytime CPC has come to say, hey, we'd like this, there's been a way to fund it. So I agree, it's a difficult pill to swallow, the idea of 2%, but I also think 2% is not a huge ask to preserve our community in the way we might want to preserve it. And when you say, well, if it's on the warrant, it means that the select board and the Fincom have already said there's money available for it. It doesn't allow the CPC to think more broadly necessarily, because there's this sort of dynamic between the funding source and the board itself, right? Is that a fair way of seeing how the CPC's works?
I think CPC funds projects that get presented, or approves projects for funding that gets presented to them by the Select Board and Finance Committee out of the capital plan.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing that goes to CPC first that doesn't go through that process.
Okay.
Well, there are, except for, there are smaller projects that, not
Yes,
not town capital projects.
Sure,
but other,
yeah, right, yeah.
Private entity projects.
Yeah, everything's changing, you know? I mean, I saw your face when we changed the name of, you know, the coal weigher or whatever, right? I mean, like, there is something that's kind of sad about the end of these things that we've had as part of our lives for a long time. So, I think it's hard. It's hard when we want nice things and we want to preserve things, and at the same time, you know, the drum of growth and development, and, you know, that's also what we live with.
But we're not saying that we can't still do those things.
I understand that, yeah, I understand that.
And I think that the main argument for doing the 2% or even the 3% is to get the match in from the state.
Right.
And yes, that's lost dollars. But to tie up the amount of capital that could be used somewhere else in non-CPC related projects, is it really worth that extra money that's coming in?
Yeah, I think
And
you have
yes,
to ask the people
it
who would
is.
pay the extra money, right? Are the townspeople willing? I remember when we voted for the 1%, and that was, it felt like a very small amount of money to do a lot of great things. So, you know, the idea of 3%, oh, we could do 3 times as many great things, which is really kind of not true, because things cost more than they had before. But
People's
anyhow,
tax bills aren't going down either, that's the thing.
that's true, yeah, that's
But just
true.
like this money now is getting funneled in, if there is a project that can go through CPC, there's nothing to stop us from funneling in more money, even to 3%, to get that
Absolutely.
match on in a year when there is a project, so.
Absolutely.
You
If
can
we find
always,
it.
yeah. Yeah, if it's something we're gonna do and we're gonna spend the money,
But that's what our capital stabilization account is for, which now has $7 million plus dollars in it. We're earmarking some for Indian Hill.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't know what that bill is going to be. There will be extra funds there, probably. It's available dollars. We look at the cap plan. What do we need to fund this year? Well, this one could be funded through CPC. Let's
Send them
direct
the
those
money.
dollars in there.
Yeah, I mean, I heard you say that you've not been told no. I mean, if that's the case, it seems like, I agree, like, why bank all this money if the desire, or the ability to spend it isn't there? But is the ability to spend it limited by the fact that it's only 1%, so you don't even look?
I think the big difference between having the money sit there and funding to the 3% each year and what we've been doing is, instead of maybe placing as much debt as we have and letting the CPC pay the debt service, we could have paid more in cash and decreased that debt service.
Okay.
yes, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
But like we're doing with the tennis courts,
Right.
735,000, we're funding 400, we're placing debt for 3. We can, as part of the town's budget, if we're placing that $300,000 worth of debt service, we have the town's operating budget that would normally pay for that debt service. We could certainly funnel that debt service payment into CPC each year and the pay down. You get the match, we pay down the funds, your fund is still whole. It's doing things like that that are going to get us to those extra dollars before we even ask the townspeople. We don't think of those things. We could be doing that with the debt service we're doing today, that we're paying out, the 60-something thousand a year that you're paying in debt service. We could be budgeting for it in the town and funneling it over to you and saying, your fund is still whole, and we're giving you $62,000 a year in extra money. It just hasn't been top of mind, but now we're all thinking of it, and we should probably do something like that. Those little things do add up. Again, we're not going to get to the 2%, but we can certainly get you more than what you're getting each year.
I'd like to see us move on. I think we have given this a robust conversation.
Yeah. So we have, at least have a consensus, I'd say.
Number 21.
Okay.
Okay, so there's no vote, you're just going to, on that?
Yeah, we'll wait for the discussion.
Pass,
with the
okay.
selectmen.
Okay, that's fine. Good. All right.
Maybe if you're going to tell them our votes, tell them our consensus is no increase.
All right. All right, so item 21, about that very topic of the community preservation committee funding. And so the proposals that are currently before the CPC that are being put forward is $200,000 for lights at Cooper Field, $734,000 for tennis courts at Littleton High School, and $50,000 for window painting and rehabilitation at the Houghton Memorial Building. So for the notes, what we're looking to do would be that the proposal to fund the Cooper Field lights.
It's Kerper.
Kerper.
The O is not pronounced.
You're
You
right.
just can not see the O.
Thank
That's
you.
the easiest
Thank you,
way to-
Jen. I
to see
appreciate
it.
that.
Yeah.
I appreciate the correction.
Yeah, it's a curse.
Kerper Field
That's it.
project for $200,000. So the idea that $200,000 of that would come from the CPC Recreation Fund, but requires the approval of the LELWD board to release funding. So that I think it's a $200,000 that was put into the fund, and then there was some sort of requirement that the LELWD board approve of whatever that is. So that, I think that vote has yet to take place. So, but it's pending, as I understand. Also tonight, there is a meeting with the community to talk about these lights and what the potential impact is. So that is happening this evening as well. So I think regarding specifically the lights, I wouldn't recommend any vote.
I think they meet on the 27th. Do you need a vote on that from them sooner?
From the
The commissioners?
I would have to defer to the Parks and Recreation Commission, who was putting forward the recommendation. So it does put you into a little bit of a bind, but then, we can maybe talk about it again at the select board meeting, and you can determine action. It could be a conditional vote.
Yeah, that's what I would do, it's conditional on
Something of that nature.
no.
Could you possibly ask Alicia to come to the select board meeting in case there's any questions on these projects?
Can we verify too that 200,000 has gone into the CPA fund? I tried to look through the open finance. I'm not sure if I'm reading, I don't see that deposit yet.
Mm-hmm.
I had talked to, is it Robin? Is that who's in the finance?
Robin?
Yeah, a few months ago reminder that it needs to get deposited. And we were hoping that we go into the last fiscal year.
We can.
That's something that you follow with Michelle on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that. I'll copy it on an email on that. So, okay, so that's the lights. The next component of this would be the $334,000 $400,000 for tennis courts at the Littleton High School. So what we're proposing in this instance is to fund $400,000 of it via transfer from the CPC Recreation Fund, but that would be via the overlay reserve. So the idea is we do $400,000 from the overlay reserve into the CPC to provide and take advantage of the matching funds, and then it channels through that account to be put toward that project. And then the balance of the project, which in this case would be $334,000, that would be in all likelihood debt service through the CPC. So it's a little bit of a different thing we had been talking about before. I think Steve and I were just kind of coming to these terms earlier today about what plan, but it certainly lessens the burden on
No, I think
an
that's very
overall
good.
fund. And
So it'll cut down your debt service payment.
Yeah, and we were hoping for, some partner with the parking lot, with the school, so I think that's good.
And along that vein for the 334, what I just said, I think when this year's budget is done, I can have a conversation with the treasurer to find out what the debt service on this 334 would be, and that would be part of the monies that go into CPC. So the town will fund that debt service.
As part of the policy.
As part of what our overall plan is, we should be paying that debt service. That's an easy way to do it. It's short money for the town. It provides extra funding there.
At our last meeting, we had talked about trying to get an understanding with the school department about who's going to own the courts and do maintenance. Is there any motion in that?
I don't think the school committee meeting has been, I don't think they've met yet.
Okay.
I was looking for
They're
the,
meeting Thursday.
is it Thursday? Yeah.
Okay,
Hasn't come
so
up yet.
could we get, Monday's going to be a big meeting. Can we maybe at Monday either have a rep or someone who give us an answer?
I think we already said we're going to invite Alicia to the meeting, so
Okay,
she can
okay, great,
provide her
great.
update, so.
Because
Yeah.
we need to have, I want to see,
last meeting.
I want to see the maintenance agreement before we spend money.
But keep in mind, Brian, as I always try to describe people, whether it be the school budget or the town budget, it's still, whatever pocket it's out of, it's still the same pair of pants. So, it's.
Right, but-
I gotta go one laugh, thank you. Yeah, all right.
I like
Thank
that
you,
one a
Jen.
lot.
Right, I mean, it's, gosh, wow, you're a tough audience, Brian. I gotta give you, I'm wasting my good material on you here. Come on. This is-
Right. We're all one town, and
But, yeah,
knowing
the
who
main-
owns and who maintenances matters.
Well, but with the point being that the maintenance cost is still gonna be a town cost. So it does, so whomever it comes from, I don't know how material that is. It's just something we need to be able to think about with those. Yeah.
Yeah, I think even outside the money though, I don't think the school committee's voted to support the project on the
I think
property.
that,
right?
and that's a
So-
separate question.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
separate- Brian's question was,
Yeah.
how are we gonna, who's gonna be maintaining it? And it's still, once you build a courts or any asset,
Yeah.
it's still a responsibility of the town, again, regardless of the pocket.
That has not stopped us over the last 25 years or so from having innumerable conversations debating this, which I'd like to have done and in writing ahead of time. And I may not get what I want.
So, last item on this is $50,000 for window painting and rehab of the Hope Memorial Building. So that presumably would be coming from the historical preservation bucket of the CPC.
Ryan, did you get my email? We had another project come up from the town clerk's office for a historic project, and we were wondering if, we're meeting next Wednesday, and we wondered if that was something that we could sneak in there, because we thought we were going to have the Webster property too, so we said to Diane, yeah, sure, go ahead, and now.
So when are you meeting next?
A week from tomorrow, but we
Okay.
could
So we're
schedule
closing-
something quick.
So we're closing the warrant on, pretty much.
On Friday.
Yeah, so that, well, at least the warrant as it relates to, Friday is for citizen petitions. But the select board would probably be, we may have a meeting on the 25th, that's to be determined. So I think,
We didn't know if we could-
Well, how much was that? I didn't read your email.
$8,000.
$8,000, okay.
I think she wants to get started on it, that's why she wanted to get it in for November.
Okay.
But we have it in the bucket, we have, like you say, we just got it, so we haven't been able to discuss it yet. We just wondered if we could,
If you could meet earlier, that would be better.
okay.
So, I mean, I think it's coming into the meeting on Monday, if you knew, if this is a quick meeting in 10 minutes,
Yeah,
and you think that's,
hopefully, yeah.
so it might be something that then you can advise and come to the select board meeting on Monday. I mean, the other way to do it is select board meeting meets at 6:30 on a Monday, maybe you
Yeah.
have a
Do it before.
6 o'clock meeting maybe, and then come over and inform the group accordingly. So that might be another way to do it.
Can you have a meeting on like a Saturday morning? Is that
You could,
kosher?
yeah. As long as it's posted.
Posted, okay.
So that pretty much is the menu of items that we're looking for here. So again, the 200,000 sounds like we need some more information on, and it sounds like now we might have another piece for under historical preservation. So this may be another article that you may want to pass on or until Monday.
Yep.
That's okay. All right. We can do that. A couple other items. Firearms business zoning bylaw amendment. So certainly don't need to remind everybody what that was. I think our February 15th the special town meeting that we had on this. This is some small changes to that amendment. I think they were recommended to us from the Attorney General's office. They've already met, and the planning board has already met, had a hearing on this, and so I don't think that there are any really meaningful changes to the bylaw. Certainly no financial implications, but I think it's just really more cleanup for it. That's why they're moving forward on that. MBTA communities multifamily zoning. This is we've got a draft version of that. I can't remember offhand when the planning board is having a hearing on that. Does anybody remember what that is? But that is forthcoming as well. And so this is specifically as it relates to the zoning that the planning board will be presenting what the plan around the commuter rail station in Littleton. What they're looking to do. So there's been a lot of conversations about this, and this plan will be forthcoming soon.
Jerry sent an email around tonight about Middleborough?
I think it was Middleborough, yeah.
Middleborough said no to this, and they're hoping other communities say no to this, so the state
Newton
changes
said no.
their mind.
Yeah.
Newton said no.
Oh, Newton did too, wow.
Hmm?
Newton did too?
Quite a while ago, there was something in the Globe about Newton saying no on it.
But Middleborough only had $25,000 in state money that's
Yeah.
in jeopardy. We have 25 million, is that what?
Yeah, we did a tally. It was we were asked to kind of talk about what kind of funding we provided. So all the MassWorks grants fall into that category, and I think it was something along those lines.
Plus we have another
Right.
$4 million request for MassWorks, so.
Yeah, but you would just think the location would make a difference because it's just.
Right. I think it's important, that this is something the state really wants, and so I think that this is not, it's not necessarily the kind of fight that, I just deeply caution the town about trying to pick a fight against the state. It's
How many units is this required?
So in this case, what this would be for around the train station is, as I understand, it's 150 units is what they're looking for.
Middleborough is 1,700?
Yeah, well, because we get to count
That's
550
right.
King
That's
Street,
right.
Street to
so,
get to 700.
Right.
Our number was 750.
yeah.
Right. There was 1,700 was Middleborough.
Oh, up there, yeah.
So, big picture, I think, is we do have that trade-off, as you mentioned, Jerry, so I think if the 550 King Street's 780, so I think it's at 460 across the street, the mill, 280 units, and then this would be an additional 150 at the station area.
Yeah, so those projects at least reduce this number significantly.
Yeah, I believe so, yes, yes.
But the town's not gonna change.
Right, but we're still talking, you know, another 1,000, 1,000 units as we're looking at the cost of the elementary school, it's like, and another police officer, another fire truck, another ambulance,
Plan. That's why we need a plan.
Indeed, and policies, yes. And
Well, we have the
policies.
policy.
We used to do policies.
Last two items, if I may, Mr. Chair, are two items that didn't come before on the select board. Fortunately, it looks like there's a few bills of prior years coming from DPW and Parks and Recreation Commission. So we're proposing to pay those bills. We've received statements and realized that the invoices weren't paid. These are things I hate bringing before the Fincom and town meeting and emphasize again and again, but it's sort of like asking, it's reminding children to clean their room, it's something you have to repeat and you hope it sticks, but it is continually a challenge. So, and someone with two teenagers, an analogy hits home. And the last piece, there's a requirement in our town code that apparently requires fingerprinting for certain activities, such as, I believe it's to get liquor licenses, things of that nature, that in many ways is kind of outlived its useful life. We don't really do that, and it's practice we generally don't follow. So we're working with town council to come up with maybe alternative language to say, well, we probably would be doing more appropriately would be to do query checks on this, as opposed to just taking the fingerprints and
Query checks the
sending it
DNA.
aside. So per our standard operating procedures. So this is something that was requested at the request of the police chief, and that's something we had missed in earlier drafts. So again, probably wouldn't be any financial implications for what you're hearing this, but
we need to approve 24, right?
you do need to.
I move that we approve 24. Second.
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Anything else before we call it a night? Anybody?
Can we approve last week's minutes?
We have minutes.
Minutes came in, they were great.
Yeah.
I move that we approve the minutes as they are.
We have a
We
couple, one change.
made a couple of changes, so let me tell you what they were. We changed Fred under the department.
You can't change me.
liaison. Fred now has highway, park and rec, and the cemetery. Okay. And Brian, you have police, dispatch, fire, and the planning board.
Fair enough.
Okay, so I will correct those and get them.
I move that we approve as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Next meeting is Monday night,
6:30?
6:30? With the select board, 6:30?
And everybody else, it seems.
Well, it starts with, so there'll be the traditional, I think it's planned for 6:30.
Okay. 6:30.
And where will that be?
That will be over in the library downstairs. It starts from.
Any motion to adjourn, any other business?
Move to adjourn.
Second? Please?
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Switch.
Brian, when you were talking about maintenance,